Hi, Luisa. I just want to make sure that we're live. I'm just going to double check that we're live now on all the platforms so that we can start. Yes, there we go. Luisa Fassi, it's so lovely to have you here. Thank you for making the time to chat to me about a very interesting topic. But first, I would like to do a small introduction. I've got your CV here and it's massive. I absolutely love what you've accomplished and you look so young. You're a PhD researcher in your fourth year at the University of Cambridge. And your focus area is medical science, but it's specifically on social media. Can you do a little bit of an intro? Because otherwise, we're going to take the hour just going off all the rewards that you've received already. But if you can do an intro to everybody.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Karla. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. So I'm, as you mentioned, like a last year PhD student, and my focus is on mental health and psychiatry. And I study how social media use relates to mental health in young people, with a specific focus on young people with mental health conditions, but also the general population.
That's awesome. And why did you choose that specific topic? Because it's pretty new that people are researching social media and especially with younger individuals, kids, and mental health and what that pertains to their mental health. So why did you choose it?
Yeah, so I was very interested in mental health at the end of my master. And when reading about mental health, one of the main debates was whether these trends that we're seeing in recent years, so an increase in mental health conditions like anxiety and depression among young people, are explained by social media. And there's a lot of public concerns that social media might be driving these increases. So that's how I got interested in the topic and decided to do a PhD on it.
Awesome. I think it's also a big topic for parents. I know that we receive quite a few questions about parents or from parents asking about what does social media do to our kids, and
Yeah.
one of the questions that I have for you is what are the benefits and the risks associated with social media with our teens?
Yeah, it's a big question. And when we talk about social media, there are so many things that we can think of. So, social media is like a big umbrella term for me. And it's very important to realize that it means a lot of things. Young people can spend time doing different types of activities like messaging friends or looking at content. And even when we zoom in into these specific activities, for example, content, a young person might be spending time looking at reels of funny memes on TikTok or looking at self-harm content. So there are, depending on how young people engage with social media, there are different benefits or risks that we need to consider. And also research is not so clear cut. So I'll try to break it down and we'll try also not to make it too long. Let's start with the risks. I think when it comes to certain activities, there are risks that we expect to be harmful. For example, we know that there's self harm content and content related to mental health, for example, pro suicide or pro anorexia content, and this type of content we expect to be harmful. There's still not so much research about it, but it's the type of content that we would say would not be beneficial for young people. Then there's another layer when we talk about risks that has less to do with the actual activities or content that people see and has more to do with how they feel. And their research shows that, for example, feeling a lot of social comparison, so comparing oneself to others, especially to ideal standards, can be linked to lower mental health, so lower self esteem or more anxiety and more depression. Whereas when it comes to benefits, usually what we hear from young people, for example, in interviews, and also there's some quantitative research that shows it, is that feeling a sense of community and exploring one's identity has been related with well-being.
Hmm. The risks are big. I mean, you touched on some topics that as a
Yeah, very
therapist,
few
yeah.
of both the benefits and the risk. I think we can could talk for hours about
Yes,
each.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just on this topic specifically, but I just want to touch on the risks. So, is there a way that parents can mitigate the risks and maybe decrease the risks? Like maybe, for example, my partner, he has this app that he uses that he can block certain apps going onto his kids' phone. Is that something that you would suggest, or maybe an amount of time on the phone, or maybe a variety of
Hmm.
things that they can do other than being on the phone?
Yeah. So there's a combination of things that parents can do, and I think it will also depend on the parent child interaction as well as the age of the child. I think, as with very complex topic, there's no one solution or clear recipe that will solve it all, but I'll point to some things that parents can consider. The first one is digital literacy, which means knowing about what social media are. So if a parent has no clue about how TikTok works or how Instagram works, it's gonna be very hard for them to have conversation with their children if they saw something distressing online, or just navigate these online platforms. So I think just knowing how these platforms work, having an account, exploring it for themselves can help to communicate with their children and prompt questions, and the child might feel more open to discussing it. The second thing is, as you mentioned, parental control. So directly managing how their child is, what content they're seeing, or how much time they're spending. And I think that might be more age dependent. Probably if children are younger, like 13, which is usually the age when they can have a social media account, 14 up until 18, there can be a bit more parental control, and usually that decreases with age. And it can be related to time spent or to the specific content that young people see. And of course, I would suggest that if we're talking about young ages, I would really look at limiting content that we know can be harmful or distressing, like the content I mentioned before.
Mm. I really love that point of was it digital literacy,
Yeah,
where the parent actually gets involved and asks questions, and they can even probably do it with their kid if their child wants them to, but just to kind of know what they're talking about, and also why it's so fun for them to be on the screen. I was looking at a post. I don't know where I saw this, but I saw a post today on why social media is so attractive, or this was more specifically for games, but why it's so attractive for kids. And it's because it is so predictable. I know with social media it's unpredictable, but there's still a form of predictability where they know that they're going to go on Instagram, and they're going to see photos of their friends, and they can scroll down and they can post, and there's structure and predictability. Whereas in the real world, it is quite unpredictable, and it's very scary to make friends sometimes. So I think that's nice. You were touching on the community part too, and just finding your tribe online and finding the
yeah,
people that think like you. So there are definitely some benefits. I think it's good to educate yourself as a parent and know what types of apps are out there, like TikTok. I don't even know if I have to name all of them. I probably don't even know
so
like
many.
half of them. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you touched on the age. So, what is the appropriate age, would you say, legally, and what do you what's the statistics? What's science saying to us that that's a good age to be on social media?
Yeah, that's a tricky question when it comes to research. So, legally, the age is 13. So, only at 13 you can have a social media account. The way this is enforced at the moment is not very strong, because how can you actually check if someone is 13? Um, so there's no real way of knowing. Now there has been discussions because of the bans, for example, in Australia, for under 16 to use, for example, face recognition or IDs to actually check. But that is the legal age. It's not really backed up by research, surprisingly. There's not a lot of studies that look at the appropriate age, maybe because it's so hard to actually test what is the age the appropriate age for like using social media. There is some research showing that, for example, females might be more sensitive earlier than males. So there was a study done on social media, time spent and life satisfaction, that found that social media predicted lower life satisfaction for females earlier at ages 11 to 13. Whereas for males, it was a bit later, 14 to 15. So there might also be differences depending on different groups and demographics.
Mhm. I know that there was a study done and it showed that 40% of 9 to 12-year-olds are on social media. And
Mm,
even though the legal age is 13, so it definitely is decreasing with age. I think it's important as a parent, again, to just kind of know that possibly it's happening, and maybe just even speak to your child and ask, look, if you want to go on, can we have like a joint agreement, and can we talk about this, and maybe you can go on, but it's a little bit more supervised if you're younger.
yeah, absolutely. I think because it's gonna happen, it's better if it happens when the parent knows, right? And for the parent to know, it doesn't have to be a taboo topic. Otherwise, children will do it. Especially because at this age, peers are so important. If everyone at school is starting to have a social media profile, there's such a strong drive to be part of the group, which is a developmentally appropriate thing. Like children to develop their identity, they need to be part of a group, they need to link with their peers, and that is how they then develop, their own person. But this means that sometimes they give more importance and weight to peers than, for example, to adult figures. And so I think it's important for parents to navigate this and be aware that by making it a taboo topic, it's going to be even harder for them to know if something distressing is happening to their children online.
Mhm. Just switching gears a little bit to gamification. So at Orly, we gamify the learning experience and we teach emotional literacy and flexibility through games. And I think it's helped. Well, I know that it's helped quite a few kids with just not being so um, typical in the way that we teach. So it's through gamification where kids go in and they feel like it's not an adult telling them what to do.
Mm,
So there's definitely some strength for me in teaching a child where they're at, and also externalizing some of those emotions. Like you were saying now about the peers, and that's such a powerful statement. They learn from their peers, and we need to keep that in consideration when we're trying to build these communities. It's not a parent or an adult that can say this is something you should do, or we believe that it's something that you can do. It's more, my friends are doing this is what I want to get into, or this is something that I see myself doing. So I think there's a lot of power in following peers, but then just being aware.
yeah, and probably that also hints to the importance of digital literacy also for young people. I think in a dream scenario, we would have curriculum at school that integrates also how to use technology and kind of helps children step by step to learn like age appropriate ways of engaging with technology and makes them aware of the risks as well as of the benefits.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be amazing. I think if kids, because kids want to know these things. I mean, we bring in kids to teach parents, what they want when they're feeling overwhelmed. And I think if we can teach the kids, say, look, this is how you feel when you do X amount of time on the
Mhm.
screen. And now you can see that you're feeling a little bit worse now. And it's maybe because you've exceeded that time. Is there anything that you know of in terms of, I know this is again like such a difficult question to ask, but in terms of how to determine what is a good amount of time for kids on screens, or is that not something that?
I mean, I can speak more generally. I can't think of a study that specifically addresses this question, and that is probably because there's no one clear solution. There is no a specific amount of time that is good or bad. And again, because social media is so many different things, if you spend 1 hour looking at inspiring content about how to paint, is going to be very different than spending an hour looking at self-harm content. Um, so that will also depend. But I think if we think of time like on a spectrum, and we think of a lot of time, so people that are spending 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day on social media, that might become problematic independently of the content, because it's displacing time away from other activities such as physical exercise, interacting with others offline, eating properly. So if we have a time displacement that is really taking away time from activity that we know are important for children's development, then that might be a risk in and of itself, independently of what they're doing. When it comes to some hours per day, which is usually what we see for like young people, I think then we need to have a conversation more about first what they're seeing and what kind of activities they're doing, and secondly, not just even that, but also how are they feeling about the content that they're seeing. Because as you mentioned before, it might be that someone is looking at content that is neutral, like pictures of their friends, but for one young person, this might be quite distressing because they keep comparing themselves to these friends. They don't feel like they're good enough, and that might lower their self-esteem. Whereas for another young person, it might be very nice because they feel like, oh, they're connecting with their friends, they see what is going on. So
Yeah.
to close, like without that layer of maybe talking to young people and understanding how they're feeling, or just having them reflect on this, maybe we're missing also the full picture.
Yeah, I really like that, asking them how it makes them feel, the content, because I mean, my partner is on TikTok quite a bit, and I asked him once, I was like, "Can you just get off your phone?" He said, "Well, I'm learning new recipes, you know, because he's a chef, so all his algorithm is just new recipes, and if I want new recipes to be made for me, then he should be on TikTok." So I'm very happy when he's on TikTok because I know that I'm gonna get better food. But yes, it's definitely about the content and how it makes you feel, and then having that a bit of balance. I know there was a report that came out last year in the UK that said 11 to 15-year-olds are on screens and on an average for 6 hours a day, which I think
Yeah.
is I wouldn't have thought it was that high, but you know
Did that
we
include also like at school? Because I think now sometimes
yeah.
like tablets, for example, are,
Mm.
are used in the classroom.
Yes, I didn't specifically say it,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would think that it included, and then it went up. It increased with age. So I think it's important to know that there's definitely a time and place for kids to be on screens, and I think it's like you said, their friends are going to be on screens. So we don't want them to fall behind, and maybe it becomes a career. You know, my specialty is neurodiversity, and I work with ADHD kids and autistic kids, and they actually learn better on screens than with looking at people's faces. You know, so there's quite a few studies done saying how much better they are in recognizing emotions when it's on screen rather than with a person. So that's also important to know, is that we learn in different ways. I just want to go back to mental health. I know that you touched on body image a little bit, but is there anything that you know of how social media affects mental health, self-esteem, body image, anything like that that
Hmm.
you wanted to mention still?
Yeah. So there are a lot of studies that look at social media and mental health, but they have a few caveats. So usually these studies shows that there's an association with more engagement with social media, either being time spent or different activities being related to a small increase in, for example, anxiety, depression, or a small decrease in self-esteem. We're not talking about big associations, but they're there. But then again, going back to the caveat, those are usually associations. So we don't know whether it's social media that is driving this increase in anxiety or depression. It could also be the other way around, that when someone is feeling anxious or depressed, they go and spend more time on social media. Some of the studies that try to disentangle these bidirectional effects show that it goes both ways. So when spending more time on social media, there's a small increase in anxiety and depression, and vice versa. If we're feeling more anxious or depressed for different reasons, we go and spend more time on social media.
Mm.
Um, and again, these associations are not very big compared, for example, to other things like sleep and physical exercise that we know are very much linked to mental health.
Mm. Would you say in that regard, in that or on that point specifically, that if parents could include like a co-regulation with their child, that it could help? So when, even if it's like a, you know, a ritualistic thing at night where you say, look, this is what I struggled with, like a little ritual, a
Yeah.
family ritual, and say, this is what I struggled with. Do you have any ideas what I can do to help me calm down? And then we can all like share ideas, because sometimes I have to watch, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to watch like a reality show to calm myself down. And I just want to be zoned out, and that's what I enjoy doing. But that's one thing that I do. The other thing is going for a walk. The other one is playing with a pet. You know, so I think it's good to show kids that we also do it,
Yeah.
and how it feels. Yeah.
Definitely. So, what you mentioned made me think of this book, Behind Our Screens by Emily Weinstein, that from a researcher's perspective, talk about this method where they sit with young people and they have them scroll through their social media feed like Instagram, and then they just narrate their emotions and feelings. I don't know how open would children be to do this with parents. Um, but even parents could do it as a way of like showing them like, oh, this makes me feel this way. And I thought that's so interesting, and that's a good way to even just have children, young people reflect about their feelings, because sometimes, you know, with this overstimulating world, we just don't stop and feel what's
Mm.
going on inside. And even just a small exercise like that might be helpful for them to get some more meta awareness about what they're feeling, and maybe they realize this content is actually not good for me, and by being aware they might start changing the things they look at online, or tailoring their algorithms by changing the content that they search,
Yeah, I love
etc.
that. Yeah, I love that, like checking in, because we as adults, I think we sometimes forget when we're
Yeah.
scrolling what it makes us feel. What if a child is more connected to online friends? What would you suggest then if we're struggling as a parent or as teachers to get them connected more in the real world, but they feel I get this often with working with autistic individuals where they say, well, I do have friends, they're all online though. And which
Hmm.
I guess it's fine. But when you're a kid, what would you say to the
Yeah, that's
parents?
also hard. Is it brought up to you as a concern from the child perspective? Like, are they feeling isolated? Is it more the parents that are worried?
Yeah, good question. Very good question. I think it's more
I'm
if
answering with a question because I don't know
yeah.
what to say.
No, but it's a good question, because if it's not a concern, it's not a concern for the kid. You know, if they're not feeling isolated, if they're not feeling lonely. But I think a lot of times parents, you know, as parents, we do want our kids to have friends where we can see them go out to parties or do
Yeah.
their things. But maybe that's just in a smaller group, or it's even in an online group. Yeah, that could
I
also be
mean,
fun.
so we know from research that friendship is very important for young people, is a protective factor against like mental health outcomes, and also for generally well-being and yeah, development. So friendship is definitely important. The question of whether online friendship can be thought of on the same level as offline, I think that's a difficult one, and I'm not aware of research that looks into it, but that's definitely interesting as a direction to yeah, explore. And again, what you mentioned about people being different, like if someone is autistic, then maybe for them it's actually developmentally appropriate to have online friends, and maybe it's different for someone that doesn't have autism, and these questions haven't really been addressed by research.
Yeah, I think yeah, there's good research out there saying that autistic individuals do make friends easier online, and
Hmm.
they don't often, you know, we just need to find out by from the child if they're lonely. So I think that's a good question to ask. There are also really good ways to teach how to be a friend and how to find friends online. So we can also look at that. In terms of how do we choose our friends, and you know, what are our strengths, what are our passions and interests, and then try and find those friends. So, and I think that's where social media is so great, because you can say, well, I like these types of programs or games or whatever it is, and then or communities like you were speaking about, and then finding friends in those communities and then taking it offline. So that
Yeah.
combination. That could be really nice. That combination of like finding a friend online and then doing it in the real world. We're actually bringing that quite a bit in with Orly too. Is like just that combination of creating a game in the digital world and then in the real world too. What if?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
agree, and I think they're so interconnected, right? Sometimes we think on online and offline as two separate domains, but it's a continuous stream of offline going into online, and yes, I think we need to study and understand better how the two interact.
Yeah, it's like it's one world, right? And I
Yeah, it
mean,
is.
yeah, and the internet and online, being online is so part of our daily lives. I mean, we're doing all these interviews online too, so we don't even need to be in the same country. Well, you know, we need to speak the same language at least for now until AI
And
catches us
yeah.
up until we can translate immediately. Um, and then speaking about that kind of like two worlds, what if a child, what would you say a parent can do if a child is more focused on their likes and their followers digitally online? What would you tell a parent? What could they do to help their kid with that?
Mm. Again, I think communication is very important. Is Are dislikes making them concerned? Is the child feeling like if they don't get enough likes, then they're not worth enough, or they're not good enough as a person? Or are they understanding that what likes are, and that they're just like a sign of, appreciation from someone, but they don't necessarily say something about their identity and their self-esteem. So I think treading that line and talking with children, understanding how they're feeling, is the first step with likes. With comments, again, I would try to understand what are those comments, and there can be different degrees of severity. There can be very worrying comments that are being done. Are they by strangers? Are they by peers? And I think depending on that, you can take different paths of action and make sure there's also safety involved if these comments are particularly harmful.
Just thinking about the
Mm,
latest series that I watched, and I was honestly scared when I watched
adolescence.
Adolescence. Yes, and if you think about that, and I did not have a clue that emojis had this type
Yeah.
of a description or meaning behind it. So I had to really look at what type of color heart I send to people and those kind of things. So would you say that it's important for parents if they have kids to know that type of language, like understand it, get to know like what all these words and the emojis and everything means so that they can kind of keep an eye on it? Or should they rather just, I mean, I know it's a difficult question, but
Yeah.
it really scared me when I watched it. Hey.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure if I have the answer, to be honest.
Mhm.
As in, what's the solution there? I don't even know if parents could know it all,
Mhm.
because how can they? Like, if it's
Yeah.
language shared by peers, it might be very hard. I think creating that line of communication with a young person, so that if there's a safety concern, the young person feels open enough to tell an adult. It could be the parents, it could be an adult at school, but someone that they know they can trust, and there's not going to be a taboo. I think that's very important, so that the concern is raised. I think it's going to be very hard for parents to keep track of everything that is going on online, but creating the communication might help, so that
And
children feel open to
yeah,
bring it up.
that's an excellent point. And what would you say, like, let's think of ideas for parents and share some ideas. So as a therapist, I would say like again, I love rituals. I think that's what makes us human, is to have these like little rituals. We have rituals for birth, we have rituals for death, for birthdays, for everything, like in between Valentine's and all of these holidays. So I love rituals. I think a ritual at night, like speaking about like, I know that when with my stepkids, I asked them about the different words, like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And they were like, Karla, you should never use these words. I was like, okay, I won't use. But I like to know what no cap and all of these things mean. I know that I'm a bit too old to use it, but I enjoyed speaking to them about it. And even though they were kind of making fun of me for using it, it was nice because they were the teachers, which I really liked. I liked empowering them like that. So to say like I have no clue, like just help me, I wouldn't use it. I promise. I had to promise. But I think like a ritual at night where you're like,
Yeah.
hey, teach me, maybe.
Yeah, asking them, oh, what does it mean? I've seen this online. Have you come across it?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that also helps create a conversation that feels bi-directional rather than the parents kind of controlling or wanting information from them, and it feels more colloquial.
Yeah, that's nice. And yeah, I think like even that, but also just to kind of share what works for you as a parent and to say, okay, well, when, because I think I want to ask you about cyberbullying because it is a big topic, and what parents can do. And again, I know that with the communication, like that's one thing, but how do we get into that conversation if kids are quite closed off when they're getting cyberbullied and they don't want to share?
Yeah, that's also very difficult. I don't, yeah, I, I mean, speaking from research, I've, I haven't come across studies that address it, and I don't also have clinical experience to say. So maybe actually you might be best placed to,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, I
to know
mean,
this.
yeah, statistically, 37% of kids 13 to 17 are reported to or have reported that they have been cyberbullied before.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's concerning in that regard, and those are just the ones that are reporting that they've been cyberbullied. Um, and the more subtle ones, I don't think that that's even being mentioned. So I think it's important to, like you said in the beginning, to go through like, this is a picture, how does that make you feel?
yeah,
This is a comment, how does that make you feel? This is a like, or these are photos without any likes, how does that make you feel? Because even as an adult, like I know specifically for me, like if I'm really proud of something and I post it, I don't get as many likes as like a photo of me looking nice, and I'm like, that doesn't make me feel nice. That kind of that bleeds into a lot of my insecurity, actually. And
hmm,
opening up about that even with our kids could be nice, because we could say, look, this is pointing out an insecurity that I have, that looks is more important than achievements. So I
yeah.
think even that kind of way of opening up with kids, and it doesn't need to be the parent, it could be a mentor, it could be an aunt. That's usually the case, is like you've got that cool aunt that could speak to the kids. So maybe
Yeah,
that's.
definitely. An adult of reference, I think, it's very important. From generally speaking about how they feel about content, and particularly if there are safety concerns like seeing harmful content or, for example, being cyberbullied online.
Hmm. What if a parent says like, I'm just going to keep them offline? What would you say to parents that say that?
I mean, again, it's different for different children and for different parents, and also depending on the context they live in. Of course, parents can decide for their children what they think is best. I think if they do make that decision, maybe it's important for them to be mindful about the social context where their children are navigating. So, are their friends also kind of with parental control or offline? Um, how is it at school? Is there a ban? Is there not a ban? And again, talking with their children about how do they feel relating to this. Are they feeling ostracized from their friends because now they don't have a phone? Do they feel fine? Do they feel okay with this choice? And trying to, yeah, have a conversation about it.
And how can parents set a better example for their parents, for their kids with social media? So, what would you recommend to parents themselves?
Mm, Well, aside from digital literacy, which I think is most
Mm,
important, so knowing actually how this platform work if they want to talk about it with their children. I guess the second thing is lead by example. So if they're enforcing some routines or some rules, as we mentioned in the house, it's important for them to comply first,
yeah.
so that yeah, children can actually feel like it's not imposed, but it's something that is shared.
Yeah, there's an interesting study by a psychologist. This was years ago, and I'm not going to say the year because I might get it wrong. But his name is Jaak Panksepp, and he said that if you spend 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes after school, and 3 minutes before your child goes to bed, quality time with them, then they're just a little bit more healthier and happier and more content. So their entire well-being increases with those 3 minutes in the three different times of the day of quality time spent. Now, I don't think it's 3 minutes per se for each kid. I think it's a little bit more that we need to focus on as parents, of course, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to spend that much time. It's not quantity, it really is just quality time. And that could be without the screen or together with the screen, like doing a little
Yeah.
meditation together or playing a game, a co-regulation game. um, just focusing on your child and being there with them. I said this to one of my clients yesterday because she asked me, what can I do to just show my child that I'm there with them? And I said, well, just be there with them. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily need to be that you need to have any expectations on your child or on yourself. I think it's just time spent, even sometimes in parallel. So that's really great. I was gonna ask you something about. I want to ask you about the age window of sensitivity to social media. Is there an age window of sensitivity?
Yeah, so I mentioned before that there's one study that looked at these windows of sensitivity and found that for boys it was slightly later, so 14 to 15 and then 19, where social media predicted a small dip in life satisfaction, and for girls it was earlier, so 11 to 13 and then 19. And
Okay.
that might be related to puberty because for females sometimes it's earlier than for males or for other reasons. And this is only one demographic, right? Gender, but there might also be other factors like socioeconomic status, um, or even like personality, popularity that might then explain different sensitivities.
Mm. What about screen time in general? So, I mean, we've spoken about it a lot now, and we spoke about that in real life versus digital, right? What we're trying to do with Orly, and I love that we're doing this, is we're trying to blend the two. So a child can play online and then they have these like weekly challenges with their parents where they go and do like a co-regulation game. So they create a sensory corner. So it's
Mhm.
educational, but it's fun. Um, would you say that screen time is can be that too? And can it be mostly that for kids and for parents?
Well, it definitely can, depending on what yeah, young people do online. And for example, you can use screens to like do a workout or a yoga routine or a meditation, as you mentioned, and that's gonna be very different than looking at entertaining content, memes, and it's gonna be again very different than looking at content about world conflict. So we can use screens in so many different ways to educate ourselves, to entertain, and I think yeah, we can definitely tailor our online environments so that it suits us. And if we understand that some content or some activities are not good, then I think it's important to change it.
Mm. And do you think that I know that we bring in parents a lot in the discussions because they're really the true experts of their kids. So I know that this is important to bring them into this discussion, but to also ask their questions and ask them the questions. And if would you say that emotional growth is part of screen time, or can we grow emotionally through screens and social media?
That's a difficult
I know, I
question.
love throwing difficult questions at you.
Exactly, which research hasn't answered, so I have to come up with it myself.
It's another thing that you can research.
Yeah, exactly. We have a whole list after tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. It probably again relates to the activities that people
Mm,
do, like whether they can develop like more social emotional skills or awareness. I think offline interactions are definitely important for that because of the different elements they entail, especially the fact that you get feedback immediately from a person and offline, whereas online it can be asynchronous. You do something and then there's some gap in time, and then you get, for example, a reply. And there's a lot of cues that we don't have online. And I think it's a very interesting for us to understand and study. Is
mm.
it actually different? Is this going to impact development for children? And if it does, is it positive, negative? And how can we make sure that to support them?
So we bring obviously a lot of the research into what we do, and there
Yeah.
is a focus on narrative media and how it improves empathy and perspective taking, and that's definitely part of what we bring in with Orly. Parents can also sign up, by the way, on Orly's website for early access. So early access. Oh, that's a tongue twister. Early access, just so that they can also have a say. Early access, and being part of the initial group of parents, you can help shape what we do for your kids and have these conversations with us. So that's great, and I can't wait to speak more to parents too. But we love the fact to bring in science, what the brain is telling us in, according to your research and other people's research, and how that shapes according to what we do online and in the real world. Ideally, okay, I'm going to ask you one more difficult question, and then I promise I'll try and wrap it up. But I want to ask you what the brain is doing when. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we go online and we're watching something online on social media, or we're playing a game. What
Yeah.
parts of the brain is being active, and does it change according to the person?
Okay, yeah, I'll try. It's a difficult question. It's also not my branch of research. I look more at mental health rather than brain activity itself. So I'm also probably not the best person to answer it. Generally, I think it's very hard to know what is going on with the brain. We can only look at it in terms of from outside, like with fMRI, and look at what areas activate. And and it will also depend on what kind of social media are people using, right? And some of it might be more rewarding than others. I think the general discussion about social media is that probably it activates areas of the brain related to rewards,
Mm,
relating to, for example, the release of dopamine, and that is also what um, leaves users engaged. So young people then want to stay more on platform because they feel this sense of reward from scrolling or from likes that then leads to more engagement and therefore more time spent on the platform.
mm,
But then again, this might differ for the different things that young people see, and also it might differ between different people. Some might be more sensitive than others. So I know it's
mhm.
not very satisfactory, but
No, no, it's good.
tried my best.
It was good. You answered it well. I think you answered it really spot on with the dopamine seeking
Yeah.
that we have with scrolls, right? And again, my specialty is ADHD, autism, anxiety, and I know that my clients, I've got ADHD, so I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s, and that kind of like just the quick wins that we get online, that really it does something to my brain that's satisfying. But it doesn't need to be something that I'm doing all the time. It can be one of my coping skills. So I can do that for a certain amount of time. So if we can help parents to see that it's not all bad, that there are some educational games. There are some games that are just kind of mind numbing, and that's okay too,
Mhm.
because it helps us with emotional regulation, right? So
Yeah.
a simple coloring in with our fingers or popping things that could just make us feel like, okay, now I have the space to breathe. So I think that gamification of certain things where we might look at it, and if you, I don't know if you remember that game, maybe I'm a little bit giving my age away, but do you know the game with the jewels? I think it was, or something, Candy Crush. Do
Oh
you remember
yeah,
Candy
that's
Crush?
yeah, of course.
I love Candy Crush. And I would look at it a bit like, why do I love this game so much? And it really is just because it was a moment where I wasn't anxious about what do I still need to do and how many tasks I have. And I was just able to breathe.
Yeah.
And I just breathe out, which isn't a bad thing every now and then. Like I just did it now thinking about Candy Crush. So thanks, Candy Crush.
It's still queuing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still working for me. This is absolutely fascinating, and I would love to chat to you more. I just want to find out if there's any questions from the audience or if anyone has any questions. So I'm just going to give it a second here to for questions to pop up. It usually takes a little bit of time. We can, while we wait, I want to ask you if you have any Candy Crush games that you like.
Mm, games, not really. I'm not a gamer.
I'm not a gamer either, but I think like, is there nothing that
Yeah, I
you?
used to play like, but that is before smartphone. I used to play like Snake,
Oh yes, Snake was
and that is
amazing.
probably the last game I played.
Oh, okay. So we must be similar ages because like Snake
Yeah,
was on
Snake
Nokia, the Nokia
back in
nine.
the days. Yeah,
Yes, and then you would get it like round and round and round, and I just
exactly.
remember
And
like
it would
that.
make the sound.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, and yes, that would be so awful if that snake just got like just before it did the whole loop and it would like and you would die.
It would, yeah,
Oh, I
that
hated that.
feeling.
Okay, so they're younger sisters. So there's a question here. Say you had a younger sister who is 13. What would be one piece of advice you would give her about screens and social media? That's a good question.
Okay. Well, one piece of advice you'll give her about screen and social media. I'm just thinking. Mm, I think I'll say two things. One is sister, like the relationship with a sister might be different than the one with a parent. So actually, for siblings, there's a bigger window for them to have conversations with their, for example, with your sister about social media. What is your experience? And create that ongoing stream of communication rather than it being a one-off advice. I think that would be very powerful and important. And a younger sister might be more willing to speak with an older sister or a brother than to their parents. The second thing, especially for females, sometimes they're concerned about body image, thinness ideals. And so the advice there would be to, well, be mindful that there can be idealized bodies online, and that's not necessarily reflective of the real world. And that is very important to, yeah, to consider and to be mindful that whether that's something that's affecting you, what you feel about your body or your self-esteem, either talking to someone or trying to change the content that you see online actively by searching and try to tailor the algorithm so that it's not showing you content that, for example, you don't want to see, which might be idealized bodies, but it could also be something else.
Mm. Yeah, that's brilliant. I think I was that 13-year-old sister,
Mm.
and my brother, thank goodness, we had a good relationship and I could go to him. And he helped me a lot with people that would be mean to me. I was extremely skinny and I definitely have body dysmorphia. So for me, it was, I always thought that I would need to eat less and, you know, not look not have any fat on me. So it was intense. And I think if I grew up in today's world, it would have been even worse.
Yeah.
So I think if I could go back and tell myself something, I would say, hey, maybe because there wasn't social media, so I would look at photos, in magazines, or I would look at friends that were skinnier than me, and I would compare myself like that. I would tell myself as a 13-year-old, um, or I would ask myself, what do you love doing? And it was tennis back then. And I would say, let's focus on tennis. Let's see, like, how are you gonna get the strongest? You need to have muscle, like let's build the muscle. Not focus on what you shouldn't do, but rather like things that you could do, to get better at the thing that you absolutely love doing. And that could take that attention away from the thing that I was always thinking about, like get skinnier, get skinnier. So I think with
Yeah.
that, I it's a difficult question to answer, but I think siblings definitely could help a lot with that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just wanna thank everyone. I know that we're out of time, so I'm not gonna ask for more questions. But if there are any questions, please sign up on Orli's website, and then we will make sure to cover all of those questions. And we will definitely have more of these. This was fascinating. Thank you so much for your time, Luisa. You're a breath of knowledge. I don't even know if that's the saying.
Oh, me neither.
But I love that you know the science behind everything. So I love that. I'm definitely gonna be messaging you and ask you what's the statistics about these things that I'm saying to my clients. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I also learned a lot from you and also from this question. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, hopefully we can do it again. And thank you everyone for
Yeah,
watching. We'll speak to you
thank you.
soon.
Bye bye.